Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Revelations with the gorgeous Maria Jones and myself, Morgana Sophia Maria. Welcome, amazing to connect once again.
Yeah, we've got some exciting things to share today, as always, haven't we? Lots to talk about with world events.
Absolutely. So, just for those of you who are listening, we're recording this on the 24th of June 2025. So, this is a week before release. So, what we are saying today is based on what we are feeling, what we're intuiting today. It's not necessarily a prediction. Just thought I'd get that out there before we even start today's podcast. So, Maria, we've got some really juicy topics to look at today. We're going to look at again at Urania moving to Gemini. We're going to look at Jupiter into Cancer, and then we have a very special guest towards the end of the podcast as well, who I'm excited about.
Do some horn blowing.
So, as we're settling into what can only be described as a very unstable situation globally this morning as we are recording, we thought it was really beneficial to really recap and revisit Urania moving into Gemini on the 8th of July because it feels like the energy is really building for this huge transit very much collectively.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking as you're saying that, as we are recording, Urania, who, for those of you who might not have heard us discuss this before, we call Uranus Urania because we reclaim her as the star goddess, as the modern ruler of the Aquarian aeon. And she is sat on that very critical 29th degree of Taurus, which is always, historically quite a chaotic degree for her to be sat on, right? As she's just kind of coming to the end of Taurus and entering Gemini. And we'll talk a little bit more about the cycles of history as we dive in today. But it's so interesting because the 29th degrees of the signs are what we call critical or anaretic degrees. So it's almost like a crisis point for the Taurus energy. So what we've been, learning for the past 7 years with Uranus or Urania in Taurus is now reaching culmination. So that's going to be globally with obviously themes around resources, economy, finances, security, safety. But also, if we're looking at it through our own chart, she's finishing up this energy in one of the houses of our chart. So we can look at it from that personal perspective too. But we can see all of this kind of fear and instability globally, which is the hallmark of Uranus and Taurus, because we know that Taurus loves its comfort, right? Taurus is not one for change, and Uranus has been kind of coming through like a stampede or an earthquake. So she's going to go into this kind of much more airy sign of Gemini, where she'll feel more comfortable. But also, we're going to have this shift from this Taurus energy, where we were, really reevaluating what is meaningful to us, really looking at our values and resources and communities into this energy of, you know, mental overload.
Mm.
Yeah, into this energy of kind of overstimulation. And we know that Gemini is the sign of duality and polarity. Jupiter's just been moving through this sign too. So we've been having a good taste of this. But when we think of this in combination with this very illusory Saturnian, Neptunian energy, it's kind of like, wow, what is going on? And I don't know about you, but I was, you kind of get up, don't you? And you pick your phone up and you're having a look at events. And it's like 1 minute it's one thing and then it's, something else. And you don't really know what is actually happening. But we do know that we're in this kind of this crisis point, which, we've been through before historically. So
Mm.
yeah, for me, it's a really interesting energy, and it's a very, I feel like these transits are very critical in setting the tone for this evolution into the next day on.
I absolutely agree. And as I was walking the dog this morning, I often walk around the woods. I'm very blessed to have some woods. And it was really thinking into not only have we got Urania moving into Gemini, we've got Saturn and Neptune doing their thing in Aries, and everything will go into retrograde and then move forward in 2026. This, for me, and the word dress rehearsal doesn't feel powerful enough. It's like the
Mhm.
technical rehearsal. So you have a dress rehearsal, a technical rehearsal before you go out on stage. This is showing us everything that can happen, could happen, and is really almost showing us what could be. And then we've got that retrograde period to kind of reset and kind of calibrate personally and collectively. But this then takes us into next year as well. So it's how seriously are you taking what is going on at the moment? How discerning are you being with what you are reading as well? Because thinking about this kind of multiple information sources, this feeling of Gemini already coming in, of being overloaded, the multifaceted nature of the truth. Who is talking truth at the moment? And it feels like it's a real, like a show and tell, isn't it? This is what can be, and we're going to get to a certain level. When I've been speaking with my galactic team as well as Goddess, they're like, do you know what? We aren't stepping in this time. You need to see exactly how far this can go because you haven't learned from the previous cycles. And it's a really interesting movement. And you're right, that anoretic degree, that critical degree, is the real wobble that we do experience. And I was just thinking for us both personally, our Chiron, I know mine's at 28 degrees and yours might be at 29 degrees of Taurus as well. So for those of us born in that kind of March 84, April 84, we're really seeing stuff coming up personally as well as collectively. It feels we are being shown for a reason, and are we as humanity going to act in a different way as these cycles begin to shift once again?
I have really been reflecting on the work of Carl Jung, and obviously a lot of his teachings are around the fact that what we're experiencing collectively is a reflection of what is happening for the majority of people internally. So this kind of energy of war and deception we've got going on, we need to maybe think about how that is manifesting within us. Yeah, where we're
I
at war with ourselves, where we are deceiving ourselves.
mm,
And of course, that is what the system wants. It wants us to be in chaos. It wants us to be in fear. It does not want us to be living free and sovereign. It wants us to keep feeding it.
yeah.
And particularly now with this AI acceleration, which is only going to get worse with Urania going into Gemini, it's this complete disconnection from, what is natural. We are controlled by these algorithms if we're not very, very aware, and they will spiral us very quickly into the fear and chaos if we allow it. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the remedy for that with Jupiter in Cancer a little bit later. And I also going to note down because I want to share a little bit about Jupiter from a goddess perspective today, because I think that's really important to understand. So we'll move on
And
to
I
her
think
in a little bit. But, yeah.
But I think that Carl Jung is really, really interesting because I'm seeing in a family situation, but also with my clients as well. This need to face the shadow, the need to integrate our demons, the need to find that inner peace, that inner stability. The external reflects the internal, and thinking very much about that fear source, that battery pack, isn't it? That's the battery pack that keeps the system, the matrix going. And if you have watched the Matrix and the AI take over, and they were solar powered, and what did they do? Well, we set out to block the sun to prevent the AI from having a feeding source. Yet, what happened? The AI began to feed off human consciousness, the human emotions of keeping them in a rigid structure. And if you remember the film, they're in the pods, and
Hmm.
that is the battery pack. And was The Matrix a film? Was it a documentary? Was it someone coming from the future to tell us what it's going to be? It's got a very Atlantis feel to it, hasn't it? But, really reflecting on what Jung can see and what he saw, 200 years ago ish, 150 years ago, is
Absolutely.
I think his key is finding that integration within self and finding that inner stability, inner peace.
I think the way we're living as well, very disconnected from what is natural. It kind of opens the gateway for all kinds of psychic infiltrations, doesn't it? And we know that the earth, the etheric field, the astral realm is much closer than ever before as well. So we can literally see, Bernard Guenther, I think it's from the Veil of Reality. Him and his lovely wife Laura Matsu talk a lot about this, and he calls it the egregore. You know, and these things feed on our fear. They tap into our trauma. The wounded spots within us. So what are we doing? Is the work of recollecting our own shadow projections. We're coming into this space where we're going to need to be, I think, very adept at self-regulation.
Mm.
So we're not going to be continually triggered by everything, which, really requires a lot of plutonic work, doesn't it? A lot of deep work to root out those places within us, because, it's very easy to be like, oh, it's this country, it's these people, it's that person, it's, that leader. And we get into these kind of very divisive, polarized places. So it's kind of like, what is within me that is responding to this in such a way? Yeah. And the algorithm will feed it because it knows. So we get into this spiral with it. And yeah, I mean, we both really love the work of Carolyn Lovewell, don't we, around the kind of shadow work and the recollection of projections. So, we're always recommending her work and her book, Existential Kinks. So if you want to do a bit of shadow work and you want to change your life, you want to practice a little bit of magic, then have a little look at that.
And not to give too much away, but we will be talking to you at the end as well about reclaiming your magic. So
Mm,
for the Aquarian Aeon, but as you were really talking about that, as you were talking about the closeness of the astral realm, that really opened up another kind of portal for me in the fact that I have noticed in the kind of realms in which I travel that the downloads at the moment that we are getting from the astral, we have to be incredibly discerning about what are we bringing through, who are we bringing through, and
mm,
what is that overall core message? Is it a one that resonates from a place of love? Is it one that resonates from a place of urgency? And that for me is always a red flag. If it's urgent to be doing something, then it's not for me coming from the highest echelons, shall we say. And it just really brought that home to me that at the moment, as we're integrating particularly the solstice energy, that we might not be getting the downloads that we expect from the astral realm at the moment, because actually we need to be dealing with our physical, mental, and emotional body in this earth at this moment in time, not necessarily outsourcing ourselves and expecting the guidance and the advice to come from Goddess, the Galactics, whoever else you channel, angels, archangels, demons. Um, but that in turn really got me thinking about a lot of plant medicine. And a lot of plant medicine is being taken at the moment. And I am going to say other substances which are psychoactive as well, which are more chemical based. I feel and just thinking about this kind of facing your demons, the Carl Jung, is that people are taking that to face their demons. Unfortunately, what they don't realize at this moment of instability is they're actually opening themselves up to deeper and darker forces. And that is actually seeing the infiltration of communities through this was going to say drug addled, not quite what I want to say, but through opening these additional portals through synthetic means or through natural plant medicine means, which are actually feeding the instability of the self. And this is really about sitting with the soul self, you know, the aspect, the spark of the divine within you without the external chatter. And that I feel for a lot of people is going to be difficult because they can't outsource it to a other body and or a medicine.
Absolutely. And I think those practices, when not done by somebody who, I mean, I'm speaking from a place of inexperience because, you know, I'm very Neptunian. I'm not going near anything hallucinogenic. Come
Yeah,
back. It won't come back. Those things aren't for me. Coffee's about as much as I can take. But from what I see and perceive and understand, you know, the level of consciousness and the space holding that is involved with the taking of these plant medicines is incredibly important. Because yeah, you're so open. It's like going to a sacred site, isn't it? You're so open. You have to be able to hold and maintain that energy. And that comes from a lot of daily practice and ritual, doesn't it? You know, that's a continual, ongoing process. But I also thought it was really interesting with you saying about, you know, being discerning of the messages that you receive. And what I have found recently is that outsourcing to try and receive information from otherworldly beings is just not there anymore. It's not easy to do, or it's, yeah, you can't access that in the same way. And I think that's because of this shifting from Pisces, which was, you know, very much about outsourcing our power to gods or deities. And the Aquarian Aeon is actually, I am the embodiment of that. So maybe I'm talking to a version of myself in the future, or maybe, you know, it is that magical practice, which we will be offering. You know, we'll be able to teach you about aligning with our true will. You know, the great work of, you know, what they call in the ancient esoteric systems of, you know, contacting the holy guardian angel. But that is, you know, a metaphor for aligning with your own true will, the desires of your higher self. Yeah, so it's not God has told me to do this, or, you know, this being or entity told me to do this. It's like, no, this is what my soul has decided for this lifetime. So I'm wondering if there's a bit
absolutely.
of a shifting going on, and that's why the information is less available or less clear.
I totally agree. So for a long time during that kind of Neptunian Pisces transit,
Mm,
I was receiving messages left, right, and center. You know, I do a lot of my channeling through automatic writing, very, very easy to connect. And now it's as I'm coming in, I have code words with my teams, by the way, and goddess, so I know it's them. And then if they get corrupted, then they're changed again. But it's more difficult because actually it's we've told you everything you need to know. Now, JFDI, please go and find what is it? What is your will in this lifetime? What is your soul self, your higher, you know, your guardian angel asking you to do? Because this is about taking really sacred self a sacred and radical self responsibility. So I think that is really important that we get across. It's not about the spiritual egotistic kind of the egoism about, well, I've received this download. It's actually no, internally, what is your soul saying to you, and how are you going to act on that rather than outsourcing? So I that's a long way of saying I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, and I think it's something we're just not used to doing in the religious or spiritual systems that we have created for ourselves. It's not something that we are used to doing. And often when somebody does follow their own true will, um, they get quite a lot of backlash.
Don't they just?
They
Yes.
get
In
quite a
fact,
lot of
backlash, what,
backlash.
several decades after their passing, often. It's what,
Absolutely. But only somebody who is following their true will can leave such a long-lasting psychic imprint. And
very true.
obviously, yeah, there's always, I think magical people are always a little bit ambiguous because we walk the liminal spaces, we walk the edges. We don't necessarily have the same perceptions of right and wrong and good or bad that other people might have because we're more
Mm.
concerned with living freely, right?
Absolutely, which kind of segues us back into
Mhm.
Urania in Gemini and just looking at that last 84-year cycle that we are closing out and moving
Mhm.
into a new one. So I know we've talked about this in a previous podcast, but I really felt this morning when we were recording, it's important to remind ourselves of those dates, which was 1941 to 1948. Really powerful, pivotal times on the world stage. And if you really think about this from a very logical, very historical, very factual point of view, this was a period in time in which we saw the Manhattan Project, the development of the atom bomb, ultimately the dreadful tragedies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We also saw the creation of the computer based on Alan Turing's work, but we also saw the V2 rockets, which were originally created in Germany. One of the lead scientists was Werner von Braun. He then came over to be a NASA scientist. You can do a lot of research on this, and that in turn became part of the NASA, part of the space program, and the V2 research then actually became part of the intercontinental ballistic missiles, but also immediate range ballistic missiles, which at the moment are currently being used. So, and also for me, really interestingly, it was the time 1947 where we found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls were found in the Middle East, which is currently under a huge amount of turmoil as we speak. This, for me, is wrapping up those last 84 years. What have we as humanity learned in 84 years? I can't answer that question. Do you think we've learned anything, Maria?
Not looking good.
Oh, is it? No.
I'm half joking. Um, but uh, yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at these repeating cycles because astrology is the study of cycles, cycles within cycles, these kind of smaller planetary cycles and the cycles of the great aeons. And we know during this time, when we were very immersed in the war energy collectively. We've got these atom bombs, we've got these um, other developments that are happening, that are accelerating technology. That also there was a lot of magical gateways being opened as well. And so we were obviously talking about Jack Parsons again this morning because he was very involved with NASA around the same time, but also is, sometimes slightly overshadowed by his teacher, Mr. Crowley, but he was very much one of the leading occultists and magicians of the time. And he was, there practicing his magic, but also I think he invented the rocket fuel, didn't he, that got us to the moon, if I've remembered that rightly.
So, there's a brilliant book called Sex and Rockets, all about Jack Parsons, mostly around his engineering. But Jack Parsons was part of the Jet Propulsion Laboratories in Pasadena, California. So, solid jet rocket fuel, essentially, which powered the moon missions. He was absolutely paramount there. He was a genius chemist, explosive expert, and ceremonial magician. And at the
Mm.
time when all this was going on, he was going out into the desert doing his Babylon workings at the same time as the war was going on, as Crowley was doing his work, and as Dion Fortune. We have to remember the work of Dion Fortune at this moment in time, because she, I feel, exhausted herself trying to bring about peace. So it's all sort in her kind of work and her will. So I really feel that Jack was overlooked very much because of his occultist past. What fascinates me is you've got von Braun or von Braun, then von Braun, heralded as one of the geniuses of NASA. Yet, if you go back and have a look at what happened in the V2 rockets, the use of slave labor, the fact that he was working on this since the 1930s, it wasn't a forced job, that he has been lauded as this kind of father of NASA, whereas Jack has been completely forgotten because he didn't adhere to what society wanted him to adhere. Whether he had his hedonistic lodge, so to speak, in California, in Pasadena. He created his elemental. He summoned in Marjorie Cameron into, he whipped up a storm. He's also closely related to Ron L. Hubbard as well, the creator of
Oh,
Scientology. Hubbard kind of denies knowing Jack, but we all know that they were the kind of Kelly and Dee squire and scribe, essentially. And all Jack is remembered for is the crater on the dark side of the moon. But
interesting.
I but I find it fascinating that, as well as all this going on, Jack's ceremonial magic, the Babylon workings,
Mm.
was happening at the same time. And for us, as two priestesses, as two magicians, sorceresses, I prefer to call ourselves, is over the past 2 years, Babylon herself has been starting to make herself known once again, not just to us two, but to other people within the collective, at the end of an 84-year cycle when some of the Babylon workings were being done. So I find
Mm.
that utterly fascinating. And I also feel that there is something else to close out that cycle and to start the new cycle that really, really needs to happen. I feel that's around the Dead Sea Scrolls, but you can feel into that as you will when you're listening. But I think it's a really pivotal time in history where those that have been forgotten may need to be remembered quite quickly for their work that they've done.
Beautiful phrase. Yeah, and I think I would argue that Jack's magical workings may have been the very thing that revealed the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you listen to the invocation within the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I know we've read out before on our Babylon
I
podcast,
am
so
the
you can
first and the
actually,
last, the whore and the holy one, the scorned. I am shame. Yes. In fact, I
yeah,
read that nearly every day.
yeah. So, I mean, that is very Babylonic in itself, isn't it? And Babylon is a name for the great goddess through the aeons. So she is a name for Inanna, she is a name for Ishtar. And I would argue that, Jack's workings revealed those scrolls so that we could receive this true transmission of the goddess. Because in the Piscean Aeon, all we've had is Mary. We've had that Mary energy. We haven't had the holy whore, the one who rides the beast. We haven't had all facets of the feminine, the red face of the goddess, very much suppressed. I mean, she made her appearances, didn't she? She popped up with John Dee and Kelly as well. And I think, we're often, the interpretation of Jack's working is often that he wanted to incarnate the goddess in one woman. But I think what has actually happened is that he has awakened the goddess within all women. So Babylon is moving through all of us in her own way. That Babylon is a current which has awakened rather than her, maybe just manifesting through Marjorie, which might have been Jack's intention. And Jack had a very ambiguous end, didn't he, as well, which is makes
Indeed.
makes me think that he might have been more important than the powers that be would like us to know. But that might be a story for another podcast.
I think maybe we should just do a whole podcast on Jack and Marjorie. I think that might be a
Oh
nice fitting
yes.
tribute at some point. But really, when you were speaking about that, I mean, I had the chills that kind of come down my body. And
Mm.
if you really think about his legacy as
Mm.
well, so he died in the four. I've got to get this right. I think it's the 40s. Could be wrong. He'll tell me if I'm wrong. But from there, you then had the sexual revolution of the 60s, and then the rise of the occult arts, which are quite accepted. So we're thinking about Gardner's Wicca, essentially, which was the start. Doreen Valente, the Charge of the Goddess, when she took everything and kind of opened up witchcraft. Essentially, that for me was the drip, the drip, which then, of course, led on to all the amazing work that Kathy has done in Glastonbury with the Lady of Avalon and opening up goddess worship in the UK and abroad. And then, so she's found the vessels, and she, through the past couple of generations, have just started to anchor in these frequencies. And I feel it's for you and I to be taking that forward to the point where we hand over to the next generation who will be truly the women of the age of Aquarius. We are the women of the Aquarian dawn, they're the women of the age of Aquarius. So we have a lot of work to do with her to set these foundations. Um, and I always find it's inevitable that you work with her. You're not drawn to her, you were told that you were going to be working with her. And there is this, you're right, it's more than the red thread, it's a current, and it's like electricity that goes through your body, and it's that this is what you really have to do. And we have to also differentiate that we're not talking about the fall of Babylon in Revelation, that I've seen a lot of New Age twist to say that Babylon has now fallen and will be replaced with the Sophia. No, Babylon is Sophia. Babylon is the goddess. It's just a name for goddess. So I see the goddess of the Aquarian age as the divine Sophia, which is the aspect of Babylon, of Mary, of Arianrod, of Rhiannon, of Hecate. All of it. It's just given her a name, but she's the great mother, and she's coming back.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. She chooses you,
Mm.
she chooses you rather than you choosing her. But yeah, there are these many faces and forms of the feminine which are reawakening. And I think, this is another thing which is hard for the New Age community to accept because of the puritanical overlays that, are so similar to religion.
Mm.
So if we use the word Babylon, like we say, there are many names for the goddess. Some are more comfortable, like Mary and Sophia. But if we use the name Babylon, then it invokes that fierce, red, primordial energy, right? And that is the face of the goddess that we need during these times. You cannot love these demons away,
Mm.
That is, we're not going to, all ascend into some kind of utopia through, um, through trying to love the demons away. That's not where we're at collectively. And I think we need to recognize that the level of consciousness on earth at this time is not conducive to that. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And the cycles will turn, the cycles will turn. We'll go through this technological age. Maybe we'll destroy ourselves, maybe we won't. But the wheel will turn and the earth will endure and the poles will continue to shift. And, we'll continue to have these incarnational experiences. We are just kind of one moment in time here. Yeah. And
One
that's
moment in the
okay.
infinite helix of time. Because, when we
Absolutely.
were chatting at the weekend, actually, are we multidimensional figures having multiple timelines all at the same time? Is Atlantis past, future, or present? And I think that for me has been a really big kind of thing to really think about. But it's not fearing. not fearing the red goddess when she comes to you, because she's just another aspect of the feminine that is suppressed. And I think it's quite hilarious that we're recording this on Tuesday, naturally the day of Mars. And on
Mm,
my day of Mars, I always do my Babylon invocation. So, she weaves her way through whether we like it or not sometimes. But really, really powerful. The other thing I just wanted to touch on, particularly with kind of just seeing as in my mind's eye, Babylon riding in on a red chariot, with chestnut horses, is very much around the sun, very much around the solar flares, very much around the 1859 Carrington event where we had a
mm,
solar flare which took everything out.
mm.
The chances of this happening again, people, is quite high, I feel, with Urania and Gemini. It's the other thing I want to touch on is the kind of, technological innovation. We've got polarization of opposites. Often the war drums are banging, but also we have this unexpected shift in the sun which in turn could potentially knock us out. So before that we, blast ourselves to kingdom come, actually the sun herself might intervene, you could say, and knock us out. So think of it, how will we manage without the technology? Also, how will we be free if that happens? Because we could no longer have the smart technology, the surveillance. So that for me was another thing that was really shining in the morning sky of the potential of kind of these solar flares.
And I think, this is often what happens during the turning of the aeons. We talked about this a little bit before, where we have, the Earth herself intervenes. There are pole shifts, there are cataclysms, there is solar activity. But again, these are things that are often covered up by the establishment. We do not know the true history of the Earth. But Barbara Hanclough has written an amazing book called Awakening the Planetary Mind, where she really goes into some very deep research about these previous cataclysms. Yeah, so not an easy read. But again, if we're looking at it from these eternal perspectives, of everything happening at once, of the soul being eternal, of, us living on this plane of duality. And I often think, how boring would it be if everything was just easy all the time anyway? I mean, we don't want all of the, the deep trauma and the war and stuff, but we do come here to, have these earthly experiences. And again, that's part of magic. That's part of the Babylon current, is being able to open and receive everything as part of, that journey back to the true will, or the embodiment of the guardian angel. I'm not particularly keen on that phrase.
Me
So
either.
maybe we'll have to think of a new one. But embodiment
Hmm.
of the true will, or the stellar body, is
Hmm.
is maybe what we're going for there. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the stellar body, the starfire body, the divine
Mm.
stuff. I don't know. You're right. Holy guardian angel always to me is just like something separate, something else, another angel. I'm not a fan either. We will think of something new to call it, I think. Um, as we're kind of sitting at this kind of turn of the aeons, I really feel that we kind of segue beautifully into Jupiter, into Cancer as kind of the antidote for what is going on externally, but also internally at the moment. I know we've spoken a lot about the importance of the land, the stars, the stones, and I know you really wanted to speak about Jupiter, Jupitera as a goddess astrology point of view as well. So, do you want to share a little bit more about kind of your interpretation of her and what gifts she's bringing us at the moment?
Absolutely. And I think it's been such an interesting ingress for Jupitera. We call her Jupitera, and I will explain a little bit more about why as I talk about her as a goddess. But as she's entered Cancer, for the first time in 12 years, bang, square Saturn, square Neptune. So, as unfortunately predicted, we've got this energy of war and defending the tribe, defending the homelands that has been, prevalent. The astrology has been completely reflective of all of the tragic events that have been unfolding upon the earth at this time. So she is, conjunct the sun today. She's kind of moving away from that square. She's going to conjunct the sun. She's going to conjunct the new moon tomorrow, which is going to be really beautiful. New moon in Cancer, conjunct Jupitera. And that brings me, to the very interesting astrological anomaly that Jupitera is exalted in Cancer. And this is something that people often find it really hard to get their head around, because in traditional astrology, Jupiter is, of course, Zeus. Zeus is a very, very naughty man in Greek mythology, a very, very naughty boy.
Naughty boy.
Very, very naughty. Um, but she is exalted in this sign of the mother, of the feminine. So that gives us clues to say that maybe at one point she wasn't always associated with such a patriarchal archetype. And I'm sure Zeus himself, is an echo of an earlier divinity as well, that the Greeks and Romans did their usual overlay with. But when we look back through time, we can actually, really associate her back through the aeons with the goddess Asherah, who was the original goddess, the consort of the god back in the very kind of earliest times. So the goddess we know as Hera, who is of course Zeus or Jupiter's wife, she actually comes down through history from Asherah. So we can see that originally Jupiter may have been this very kind of sovereign golden mother goddess type energy. And of course, Jupiter also rules over Sagittarius, which is the sign of the Amazon, and Pisces, which again are very feminine, more goddessy kind of sign. So if we look back far enough, we can see her as this goddess energy. So we can see what a fertile combination it is to have this, very kind of golden mother goddess in the sign of Cancer, which is very fertile, it's very birthing, and it takes us back, really deeply into our ancestry. Yeah, Cancer is all about ancestry. Cancer is the womb space, it's the fourth house, it's the moon, within the birth chart. And it is that sign that reminds us that we were a cell in our mother's body, when she was in our grandmother's body. And we had an amazing talk about this from Carol over the weekend. So we'll get her on to explain a little bit more about
Absolutely.
astrology and genealogy. But and I think her book is already out. So Carol Crow, go and have a look. She's one of the spiral initiates, and she's woven her work and of genealogy and astrology really beautifully. So go and have a little look at that. But this is what Jupiter in Cancer is really inviting us to remember, is that connection to the magic of the ancestors, to those who have lived through these cycles as we are living through now. Yeah. So what can we learn from them? What can we what strength can we draw from our mother line, and also what needs healing within our mother lines? Because a lot of the trauma that we're seeing playing out at the moment is reawakening our own cellular memories of times when we might have been displaced from our homelands, times when we might have been persecuted. We've all got the trauma of war in one way or another in our lineages. So again, this is a real opportunity to do that shadow work, not only for ourselves, but for previous and future generations. So yeah, just some
Really,
reflections on that really unfolds.
yeah, and really beautiful that we've taken it away from kind of taken it away, but we've kind of softened it back to where it was, because for me, Zeus never really fits with Jupiter. It just doesn't sit right. But then if you think of Jupitera as kind of the bountiful grain goddess, the kind of the ever-loving golden mother, that does make that Jupiter in Cancer just feel so much better and kind of a lot softer. It's a transit I'm really looking forward to. I think it's immensely beneficial for a lot of us. And of course, there's the importance, therefore, of switching off and going to sit on the land with the stars, seeing the stones. And I was just going to chat to you a little bit about that because I had a thought over the weekend about that. And I know we're going to dive into the stars and stones at the moment, but with everything that's going on in the world, given that a lot of the sacred sites are, how should we say, becoming more difficult to access, I feel it may be time for us to either re-access smaller sites, but actually to start creating our own places on the land and actually, making our gardens the sacred space, because whatever happens on Earth at the moment, and I just see so much restriction around sacred sites, actually as part of the new aeon, perhaps we need to seed the next generation that holds that energy without restriction.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Everything can be sacred land. Everything can be a sacred site. And a lot of these stone temples, of course, they're built on ley lines. There are specific alignments, and some of them, not all are on ley lines. Some of them are placed for other reasons. But we create a sacred site by continuous ritual activity. So we can create that energy, within ourselves. The body is the altar. Everything can be a sacred site. Everything can be a sacred moment. But also, I think there is a lot of power in being in those spots where the ancestors were as well. So it's kind of taking that wisdom, I think, and maybe making sure that it is kept safe for
Absolutely.
the next generations. Because if we lose access to these sites, we want to ensure that the wisdom is still preserved. And I think that's what our ancestors were very, very keen on. When I remember my previous lifetimes in these aeons, turning of these aeons, probably because I have a Sagittarius South Node as well, but a lot of it is about preserving teachings. It's making sure that we don't lose the sacred, that we don't lose meaning and purpose. It's very Sagittarian. So I think for us, it's, as we're coming into this digital age where things are so easily distorted or erased, how are we going to continue to preserve these wisdoms? If they burn all the books again, where are we going to preserve that wisdom? Yeah.
I
So
had a thought about that last night about book burning. Isn't that strange?
yeah, well, I was reading this, I was watching something this morning, probably some ridiculous reel on Facebook, but it was speaking about, where humanity would be right now if all of that knowledge and wisdom hadn't have been lost, if those books hadn't have been burnt down, if the Library of Alexandria hadn't been burnt down, if they hadn't crucified all of the teachers, that go against the traditional religion, where would we be now? So it's like, how do we
Where
still preserve that? What are the modern day mystery schools that we're creating?
and where would we be if all the Dead Sea Scrolls were released from the Vatican?
Oh yeah, well,
Mm.
yeah, that would be an amazing Uranus in Gemini transit to get under the Vatican, wouldn't it? And see what mysteries are down there.
Oh, there's a podcast. We're talking about the stars and the stones. I feel it's really good time. We are just going to quickly pause the recording to bring in our special guest. So we will be back with you very shortly. So you are joining us after our tiny little pause because we have a very special guest with us today. We have James Meath, the co-founder of Stars and Stones here from Australia, and he is going to be sharing with us a little bit about his journey. Welcome, James.
Hello, thank you for your invitation.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm going to hand over to Maria, who has got the pertinent questions for you.
Yeah, so we've just been talking a bit about the importance of reconnecting with the land, with the stones, just because some of the astrology that is happening at this time. So we thought it would just be really interesting to hear from you, from the other side of the world, what the stones mean to you, because we know that it's been over 20 years now that you've been journeying here to see them, isn't it? To be with them.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's a big question.
Yeah, like I said, well, like Maria said, yeah, 20 years ago, it was my first road trip where it took me months to come up with a road map because there was no smartphones. I don't think there was GPS, but I just had printouts of maps and just had a compass and would just hit the road with the old school books, the road books in England, and just try and find these rocks. So that's what started the fascination with the rocks. Um, and I think the main reason I enjoyed it back then was basically what I felt amongst the alignments and the monuments of these rocks. I guess that was the main thing. And then from there, there'd be different phases. Uh, in different years that I'll get something different out of the rocks. Like I went through a sort of obsession about angles and alignments and just going crazy, trying to go to some sites, trying to work out what the angular alignments are. Some sites I just don't do that. It'll just send you a wall. But then also 2 years later, I was an outdoor hiking guide down in Tasmania and did a lot of extensive geology research during the studies. Always been fascinated with rocks in general, but then also the geological aspect of how rocks are formed, their properties, etc., etc. So definitely when I go to these sites, I do really focus and emphasize on the type of rocks that's chosen, their properties, how difficult it would be to cut or break or even shape some of these rocks. I find that quite fascinating. So, how rock is formed, I find extremely fascinating in itself. But ultimately, the main primary, I guess, reason I go back to the rocks is more the feeling or the personal connection I find with the rocks and how it makes me feel, and that sort of interpersonal uh, benefits I get from that. And in saying that, like I've seen megaliths from a lot around the world. I've seen stuff in Malta. I've seen a little bit in Spain. I've seen some in Denmark. I've seen a lot in Ireland. Some in Sweden, I'm trying to recall probably. But yeah, out of all of them, yeah, the British Islands are the ones that resonate mostly with me in terms of, yeah, they're just so fascinating. Um, I'm fascinated with places like Egypt and on a technical aspect, like, yeah, there it's amazing in terms of what's built, how they built it, and definitely the technical tool marks that are left on some of those sites, I find extremely fascinating, and it's great. But again, with all that, my main draw is still the British Islands. So there's something here that I love the monuments here out of all the other places. So um, yeah, I don't know. I'm just a bit rock crazy. So yeah, 20 years ago, yeah, I sort of like again, the road trip was 20 years ago. Left it for a bit, did the old normal stuff of whatever you do when you're growing up. But then would come back and visit them, but mainly definitely after the hectic period during the COVID circus parade. That's when I just once everything opened up, I go, I need to go back to these rocks, and I've just disappeared. So that was the main reason why I went back, and then from there it's grown to where we take people out to some of these sites. Yeah.
So, do you feel coming from Australia, which is obviously a very different landscape, a very different energy, do you feel here in the British Isles amongst these stones that you can remember who you are a little bit more, maybe feel a connection with the goddess?
Interesting question. Like, I mean, coming from another country, things in another country can seem more exotic, as an English person seeing a kangaroo for the first time would be a feeling that I won't be able to comprehend, because it's a unique thing. So yeah, these rocks may be more exaggerated in the feeling that I get, because I don't have easy access to them. I don't have them. Like some of the trips that we do, like we did an equinox Stonehenge trip, and we took some English people that had never been Stonehenge whatsoever, and the first time they were actually going to touch the rocks, and yet I've seen it. I've been there 8 times, and they've never been any time. So there is a different feeling, or an intensity first time, or many times, when visiting these places if you're not from them. Whether I was here prior experiences, possibly. Either way, these rocks in these lands, I have a strong, deep connection with them for whatever reason. So yeah, was there a past entrenched feeling or experience here? Because yeah, here it just draws me more. Yeah, for sure. And like I've said, I've seen a lot of them, but the British Islands, there's just a real strong connection. Why that's so is up for debate and contemplation.
Gemini mind, the Gemini mind. But we have seen such amazing transformations take place within people when we take them out to the rocks. And I think sometimes it's hard to put into words what happens when you're in those places. It's not always something, that you experience as a huge moment of awakening or a rush of energy. Sometimes it can be like that. But I think sometimes it's just this unfolding process of remembrance. And I do feel like some people are more attuned to certain sites than others, depending on their astrology as well. Like we really love Cornwall. We really love Cornwall. We know that Cornwall has a very kind of watery lunar Cancerian type element to it, which James has in his chart as well. So I think it really depends which site you go to and what you need as well. So we work a lot with the energies in Cornwall, but also in Anglesey, which is very different. It's much more a place of the dark goddess and the kind of ancient mystery schools. So I think everywhere you go, you pick up something else, whatever you need in that time.
So could you both tell us a little bit more about the next Stars and Stones trip to Cornwall?
Oh yeah, so we ran a trip last year, which was really good, really successful. We all had a really good time, and as a first trip, it was ran pretty smoothly with minor challenges, which was great. But yeah, this year we're planning to go again. Just hoping to get some more numbers to the trip. Obviously, there has to be a certain minimal amount for us to run them, but I'm really eager to run this. We're putting 3 different new destinations on this year trip. So yeah, definitely, even if you were on last year's trip, there are 3 new magical spots that are quite powerful as well. The new ones are Cananuri, Trevally. I'm so bad with the names. And then yeah, the really good one, which I just posted recently, is Dulo. So these sites are really unique, where Dulo is a pure quartz stone circle. Again, there is no stone circle that is purely quartz that I know of in England, in Europe, or across the world. You can have one quartz stone in a stone circle, but this is a complete quartz stone circle, which again, I find fascinating and I think needs more emphasis, and that's why I released a video stating, hey, this is a pure quartz. It's a very unique circle. Cananuri, again, you got this honeycomb chamber underground. Again, I haven't come across anywhere where it's like that. We've been to many villages and old Bronze Age settlements and older, but this one has a honeycomb chamber underground. It's like 2 levels minimum, which is just out of this world. Again, that place doesn't get a lot of attention. It is hard to get to, but that one is a great place to go. And then Trevally. Trevally is just a dolmen, but a very large, prominent, popular dolmen, it's a great one as well. So yeah, so that should be happening in a week or so. Yeah, and then there'll be the other ones on also we're doing Minotaur, Basculin, Merry Maidens. Yeah, so there's three. Yeah, it's like six or more popular, really strong, powerful sites that people can in basking. Yes.
Yeah, I think that beehive chamber is very unique at Canonony, and I think these are, they're often called ancient settlements or villages, but they're mystery schools. So yeah, it's well worth heading down there for sure if you've never experienced the beehive chamber, because it is, again, it's one that's quite unique to the British Isles, like the court stones of Judo. And we're also going to be off to the south as well. In August too, we're going to be doing the sacred sites of the south, places like Bella's Nap and St. Anthony's Well, because these sites get a little bit less attention too, but I feel like they're all awakening at the moment. So got a very busy summer of stone hunting.
And in between it all, we will be putting out some podcasts as well. So we will put everything in the show notes. You can also find it at stellarmysteryschool.com. There'll be some posts on Substack, posts on Facebook, how you can book on. And just before we go, we have something a little extra to share as well. So hot off the press, and we've just opened up the waitlist. So Maria and I are going to be teaching from autumn equinox a brand new course together, Astrological Magic for the Aquarian Aeon. I don't know if you just want to share a few words, Maria, about what people can expect from this brand new offering.
Well, it's really the embodiment of everything we talk about in the podcasts. Slightly different from the silver spiral teachings, which are very, concerned with teaching people astrology and the goddess archetypes within astrology and becoming a priestess. This is a little bit more about the self-mastery, using magic for self-mastery, self-empowerment, becoming the sorceress of your own reality as we go through this time of the shifting aeon. So we're very excited to share that with you. This journey through the planetary spheres and some really powerful magical practices.
We are really super excited about that. So if that is getting your juices flowing, then simply drop us a comment underneath the podcast and Substack. If you are on Facebook or Instagram, you're going to drop us a note there or email me at hello@morganasophia to get on the waitlist and to hear before the doors even open for that. So we are really excited about that. And it just leaves me to say thank you, James. Pleasure as always to see you. And if you want to see, thank you, Maria, as well. If you want to see them both in Cornwall or going to Anglesey later in the year or the southern sites, I highly, highly recommend it. And again, from all of us, a huge amount of gratitude for all your support on the podcast. And until next time, we sending you a lot of love and see you again soon. Take care.